Welcome to Seniors for Peace. We're very honored to have Cliff Kindy and Heidi Gross here, and it'll be our program this morning. And I'll mention one more time the Poor People's Campaign rally is going to be in Washington D.C. on June 18th, and Reba and I and Nan, I know, are all going. If you want to know more about that, let me know and I'll tell you about it.
Okay. Can you hear me okay like this? We turn the other one off. Oh, because of the speaker. Maybe the speaker is because we're in front of it.
So maybe we do have to stand up on the podium. Maybe we do have to be up there so that we're not right underneath.
So we're not echoing that. How's this do? If I get behind the speaker, does that make me echo less? Okay, so maybe we can do from here. Do you want to sit? Okay. I'm Cliff Kindy. Cliff Kindy. I live about 4 miles east of you here. My wife and I have an organic market garden. I've worked much with Christian peacemaker teams, now community peacemaker teams in conflict zones around the world. And Arlene and I have also done lots of disaster work in following hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and those kinds of things that are going to get even more difficult from what we hear.
And my name is Heidi Gross, and I grew up where Cliff lives now. My parents are Bob and Rachel. And I, for over 10 years now, have lived in Chicago. I work at Northwestern University, and I work with help with experiential learning programs for our students. So helping our college students get connected with communities, neighborhoods, organizations, leaders in the city of Chicago.
Are you going to take us?
And I will get us started. So, as you probably all know, if you read the title or the topic for today, we're going to be talking about climate change and about kind of like what might be appropriate responses to the realities of climate change. So we're going to ask to hear a lot of you all today. Just warn you right now, you'll all be talking and giving us some feedback. And we wanted to start just by asking, like, how do you all think about climate change? Is it an issue that you follow in the news? Does it feel like something that affects you personally? I'm asking seriously. So you can take a second to think about it, but then I'd love to hear some responses. Yes, you follow it. Yes, it feels like an issue that affects you. It's because it's hard to read. Yep. So you read about climate change and then you try to like take actions based on what you're reading, but it's hard here sometimes to figure out how to take action. Okay, so your career for 40 years in California was studying climate change and its impacts. Wow. Okay. So like understanding predictions about um, how much demand there would be for energy use in California, and then how that might affect the climate, and then how much we might need more air conditioning. Yeah. What about other people?
This is not about me, but during World War II, during CPS days, my husband's friend who lived in Northern California worked the water system in his house. So it went from here to here to here and went through all kinds of processes. And he was really into climate change, I felt.
So he figured out how to like reuse the water in his house and try to conserve water that way. Yeah, that's great.
I'm part of course, a web of connection in our world, in our nation. Personally, the impacts have been minimal, but impacts in the web have been astronomical. That impacts me.
Interesting. So you feel like you individually haven't necessarily had a lot of impact, but because you feel connected to other people who have had bigger impacts, like what are some examples of other people who have experienced significant impacts?
Well, I think about the folks in the hurricane alley, or the folks in the wildfire zone. So I have relatives who live in those areas, so I hear things. But as far as direct.
Yeah. So hurricanes that are stronger and more frequent, wildfires that are stronger, bigger, more frequent, more sustained. And so, yeah, if you have family there, that can feel a little more directly impacting.
I think we're seeing more effects from climate change right here, just in the way the weather is.
Yeah.
Really hot one day. Actually turned my heat on the other day.
Yeah.
Now we're back to air conditioning.
Yeah. So the extremes of even our weather right here. Yeah. 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 And I guess to me, it seems like these changes are speeding up, right? So like more like every year, maybe there's even more impact or there's more changes. And so something I've thinking about, I work with college students who are like 18 to 22, and I'm in my early 40s. You all are maybe like another generation or two older than me. And I wonder how much our age impacts the way that the urgency we feel around climate change. Like, I maybe have about 40 more years on this planet. And so if I think about how much has already how many impacts already are happening, either directly on me or on people I love and care about. And I think about like in the next 40 years, how many more impacts, how much worse is it going to get? And then I think about like my students who are 20 or more years younger than me, and they have that many more years. So I just wonder for all of you, if you imagine for a second that you have 80 more years on this planet, like think for a second, imagine you're 10 or 20 or 15, and you're imagining your lifetime on this planet as it is now. How does that feel? Like what might that make you want to do or change?
Like, would your lifestyle be different?
Yeah.
I have a 16-year-old granddaughter who is very connected to nature. And considering environmental studies in college. And during her spring break, we went to a movie in the cinema center called Love My Nature. And it looked at the whole issue of climate change and especially the responsibility that human beings have for that. But it also was uplifting about the connections we have with nature. And on the way home, she said that the year before in her science class, they had said that within 20 years, this world would be uninhabitable. And she was devastated when she went home. And so she's trying between the real danger and her own totally hopeful nature.
So your granddaughters and you and she went together to a movie, Love My Nature, and she was hearing that this world might be uninhabitable in another doubling of her age. And yet at the same time, she's a very hopeful person because she's involved in nature and loves nature, hopes to work in environmental issues. So that, phew, wow.
Biggest polluters continue to pollute. Some of the worst are continuing or throw another war in, and all. It's hard to keep up hope in the midst of those kinds of dynamics.
Feels like a good transition.
Okay, well, the thing that sparked this whole enterprise today with Heidi and me was reading Andreas Malm's book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. It's a book that is a critique of nonviolence. And we've grown up very committed to nonviolence in our life, in our actions. And Malm suggests that maybe it's time to up the ante, that the crisis we're facing with an environment is going to call for more serious actions. It might, and he goes back, he looks at the suffragettes, at the civil rights movement, at the early stages of the environmental movement, essentially says, well, what we're doing to try to change or try to stop climate change is not working. We have to up the ante. We have to become more extreme. And he suggests a whole variety of things, but we're going to put it to a jury, and you are the jury. Is this action we're talking about nonviolent, or is it violent? And you've had your own experiences in violence and nonviolence. You've had longer years than either of us had. So you're a good jury. We're going to divide you into groups of 3 or 4.
3 or 4.
3 or 4, and you can
Pick your pick.
choose yourself. You can form your own jury. It might be some imbalance in a jury, but you're going to put yourself in groups of 3 or 4 people. Heidi's going to give you several scenarios, nonviolent scenarios, and you're going to be the judge. You're going to be the jury that decides, are these actions nonviolent? Are they consistent with the principles that we've held as peacemakers? This is Seniors for Peace. Are these things that we can promote? Are these things that we would be willing to be involved in ourselves as nonviolent actions? Am I clear?
Like, I'll just give as an example, like blowing up a pipeline, an oil pipeline, the title of this book, blowing up, that sounds violent. On the other hand, if you think about the amount of destruction and violence that's happening in our world as a result of our over-reliance on oil and extracting that oil and burning that oil, maybe the less violent thing to do is to blow up the pipeline to stop that flow of that process. So the examples we have are kind of like along those lines. And so the question would be, yeah, is it violent or nonviolent to blow up a pipeline or to do some of the things on these papers?
So Heidi's going to pass out papers. So why don't you pull yourself into groups of 3 to 5 people so you can make this your active jury. And Heidi and I will be available to answer questions, to maybe add some perspective to the, or you could be your own jury too, if you want to.
Right.
Oops, I better stand up here. We'll probably interrupt you in about 1 more minute, so we'll give you a chance to get as far as you can get 1 more minute.
Yeah. Or you put people in groups. You should always say hello. They'll be in there first. We'll come out of it.
Well, we can just.
Well, I would actually maybe hold off on the last thing. Because what I would say is, I think, based on the instructional here, I think they're gonna say all these things are violent. And so then what if we say, well, what's your idea of that? Okay, yeah.
Okay, the jury has had its time. You can stay in your circles, in your little circles, and we'd like to have a report back. Say what the action is, whether it's violent or nonviolent. And I'm going to try to use this handheld mic so you can speak into it as we move from circle to circle. So just briefly, if you would say what action you grappled with in your group, how you as the jury came down on a decision of whether it's violent or nonviolent, and then we'll move maybe
And then
one
we'll
in each
continue
group.
on. So just quickly, you all got some overlapping actions and some that are different. You can just pick one that you want to talk about that you
Yeah.
talked through. You don't have to like report back on every single one that you had, but just pick one that was especially interesting to your group.
Okay? I'm gonna.
Well, they like we like this creative planting corn on the helicopter pad in Mexico. We thought it was very creative and nonviolent.
Are you ready to report? We'll come back.
The question is blocking the export terminals on U.S. coasts. And what I would say, from personal experience and reading, if you target the LNG tankers, liquefied natural gas tankers, which are floating around the world, and block them from unloading their gas, it won't get in the pipeline. It can't be used. This is very much relevant to what's going on in the Ukraine. It's been going around the world in terms of this natural gas, which is everybody's favorite non-fossil fuel because it's not as bad as coal or oil. But on the other hand, if you've done any research on these tankers, they are monsters. And if they blow up, a slight accident, people get killed. And if they're in a harbor where they have to be, where there's a lot of, like in Boston Harbor is one of the more vulnerable ones, and they move these tankers, giant tankers in, and they turn them around, right? To unload natural gas to the Northeast. And there's all around the world. And right now it's part of the deal with dealing with the Russians and their natural gas. And if the Europeans would use liquefied natural gas to replace the Russian gas, then theoretically, I don't know how you do the calculus here in terms of nonviolence. People are being killed in the Ukraine over fossil fuels, right? The use or the non-use. So I don't know, how do you do the calculus? In my mind, something's got to be done. Because people are being killed. Whether or not this is effective would be effective in shutting down the Putin's army, because their economy depends on natural gas, as we know. I can't answer that. You need a U.S. military or NATO to figure that out, I guess. But anyway, that's one of the ones we talked about. Okay.
Thank you.
De-airing tires on all SUVs and Hummers. We thought that was nonviolent, but it would be illegal. I mean, in a way, you'd get your day in court and then you could testify as to why SUVs and Hummers are not good for the environment.
Thank you.
Our question was using sledgehammers and chisels to break down the gates at Hebron University after the Israeli occupation blocked the gates with concrete blocks and welded them together, or welded them shut. And we discussed this as being gray area between violence and nonviolence. Using sledgehammers and chisels seems certain part to be violent reaction, but probably understandable and justifiable given that they're just trying to undo some violence that the Israelis implemented against them. I'm not sure that's exactly what you're wanting us to determine, but
Thank you.
Closing tar sands pipeline valves. We did recognize that the tar sands are less volatile than liquefied natural gas. So this one might be something we could look into further regarding, is there a real possibility if we close a valve someplace that upstream we cause some kind of an explosion, or is that not a real possibility, even that we're dealing with tar sands? So this one merited further study, we thought.
And the one thing we struggled with is each of these four was, would we individually be a part of it? You know, we're assuming somebody else is doing this activity. Would we do it? That's when the rubber hits the road.
Okay, that's good, good issues that you're dealing with. Let's come to our last group here.
This is using the sledgehammers and chisels, like what he just talked about. So I think he's pretty well answered our concern. I would say so.
Thank you all very much. It's good to have a jury that's willing to grapple with issues.
See whether or not conscious acts of civil disobedience are okay. This is very much an issue. Is it okay to consciously break the law and be willing to go to jail for a cause? And that could be put into a lot of these little, as something that some people might think that if we were to take my suggestion on instructions to the juries for future questions, it might be a little bit different.
Your name again? Your name again? Don. So Don's saying instructions to the jury would be helpful. Now, what you've been grappling with sometimes is a little distant, talking about somebody else, but as Ed said, it could be talking about yourself. Would I be willing to do that? Nonviolence has risks involved. And first, what do other people think if I do this nonviolent action? But it's also, in some of these actions, your life is at risk if you do that action, because some people may be very angry at what you do. And are you willing to take that risk in a nonviolent action? So they're hard issues to grapple with. Sometimes it's easier for us just to sit and watch TV, but the times we're facing are those issues critical enough that we need to take those risks, to push our creativity beyond its limits. Heidi, you want to?
Well, I don't have anything different to say, but just your group also talked about it might be justified to de-air tires. It also might be illegal. And then you go to court and explain why you did it. So yeah, I think like this is a group that's familiar with the idea of direct action, facing consequences for that action, why one might choose to take actions like that. Right. So there's like the individual action, like maybe deactivating something so that it can't do harm, but then also changing the laws so that SUVs aren't made anymore, for example. Or they're all electric. Yeah.
This is a shortened version. You know, usually a nonviolent campaign starts with some initial steps that may look at those kinds of issues. And if they fail, then you move into more serious action and then more risky action as a part of a strategic campaign that step by step moves toward a goal. Now,
We've got 25 minutes left. So we're going to plan your collective Seniors for Peace nonviolent action to try to combat climate change.
and Heidi has said that for younger people, it's more critical. Sometimes for us that are older, well, I don't have many more years. The world's probably not going to become unlivable before I die. But it might become unlivable before Heidi dies, or Greta Thunberg might, and that might be by Greta Thunberg is more personally involved and willing to take those risks or sail a boat across the Atlantic or do every Friday a vigil instead of going to school. So what are you willing to do as Seniors for Peace at a level that maybe Heidi or Greta might say is required in these times? What kind of nonviolent action to stop increasingly worse hurricanes, wildfires, starvation, floods,
The war in Ukraine.
the war in Ukraine? All of these things are part of the complexities of worsening climate disasters. So what steps are you here at Timbercrest willing to take? So why don't we spend some time in our small groups again, come up with some suggestions. We won't give you very long. You'll have time in the next 1 month to refine those. So in your small groups again, so it's not so much a jury this time, but a creative circle on what kinds of things would you be willing to do to step in the way of these climate disasters? Clear? Sure.
So Cliff and I were brainstorming a little bit. And so here are some things we thought about to get you started, and then you can think of your own if you don't like these. We thought about going to every gas pump in North Manchester and parking a car in front of it and leaving with the keys. So that every single gas pump in North Manchester is blocked and no one can buy gas.
Or how about, I've been here around Timbercrest quite a bit, but I haven't seen one single solar panel. Is there a solar panel? Okay, what if Seniors for Peace started that campaign to start taking Timbercrest off the REMC grid that's mostly fueled by coal? Those are the reserves from the Rural Electric Membership Cooperative. Coal fires primarily those plants. What if you started that campaign to put solar panels on all these beautiful roofs here at Timbercrest? What else?
Let's see. Oh, what if you planted trees, turned some of the roadways at Timbercrest or even around town into plants and grass and trees instead of roads?
So the cars don't need to drive on
so
them
that
anymore.
only people can walk on them.
Or what if you started a campaign that was based on individually, everybody paying 50 cents a gallon, call it a luxury tax, 50 cents a gallon luxury tax to fund a campaign to stop the extraction of frack oil or tar sands oil around the world. But you'd have to You'd have to build that campaign across other retirement communities, across our country and across other countries around the world in such a way that has the power to stop the fracking of oil and the extraction of tar sands in Alberta, Canada, and other places.
Okay.
That's
There you
some
go.
ideas,
Just some ideas to get you started, but you can come up with your own.
but you probably have better ones, so
Yeah.
go.
So maybe like 5 to 7 minutes in small groups. Is
Okay,
that good? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we'll take about one more minute and then we'll come around and ask everyone to share what ideas you came up with or what your conversation was focused around. Is this on? Yeah. All right, so I'm going to bring the microphone around again, and we'll start with this group in the back to hear what brilliant action items, ideas you all had.
Well, we talked about two ideas. One was already mentioned, I believe, of the solar panels would be a good way to try to reduce the coal and the other more harmful fuels that are used to generate electricity. And then we also talked about hybrid vehicles and EVs that are coming more and more onto the market, that a lot of individuals, residents of Timbercrest who own vehicles, I've noticed, are driving hybrid vehicles. And so if we could encourage, or even for ourselves, the possibility of getting EV or hybrid if we don't already have one. And then also we could have a letter writing campaign to the legislators, encouraging them to pass tax credits or something for other people to make it possible to purchase better EV vehicles or hybrid vehicles.
All right, those are some great ideas. We'll move to this group now.
We also talked about the solar panels and where they would go and how effective it would be, and somebody knowledgeable would have to take over. And then there's, to us, an awful lot of mowing that could be reduced. And then carpooling, especially on Sunday morning, when all of us are heading in the same place and in one or two people in a vehicle. So maybe more of that, carpooling.
Cliff is taking notes. These are some great ideas.
The solar panel issue, one of our main activists here was Fern Baldwin. And Fern Baldwin was one of our main activists here. I think she's been gone about 5 years now. And she does her research. And repeatedly addressed the issue of all our flat roofs that could have solar panels. One of the responses that she got is that the Manchester Church of the Brethren is on REMC. Timbercrest is on Duke Energy. And it's the other way around. Okay. Obviously, we can't just get the energy from the solar panels and use it. It has to go through an electrical company. And that was forever the excuse that they don't handle it in the same way.
More ideas?
We also said we're not doing enough recycling of our paper. There's too much paper being in our mailboxes every other day, it seems like, and many are not recycling enough.
So maybe less paper, maybe, and making sure that it gets recycled. All right.
Well, we think we could use less water when we brush our teeth. There's a lot of little things like that that might make a big difference at some point. I'm concerned, I think the solar panel idea is a great one. I think we've proved at the church that it really is efficient. It's economically, it's good for everyone. Maybe we need to work with the co-op to see whether what is possible in that lane. Was there another idea? Oh, I'm not sure that here at Timbercrest that our recycling is real. When Arton and I lived to him, he made sure that the paper got into a box. Right now, I'm putting my paper in a tub and hoping somebody pulls it out and puts it in the right place. But possibly we could be more efficient here at Timbercrest in our recycling. Be aware of where where things belong, how we can get them recycled. Maybe we could be more. At one point, Timbercrest, we all had jobs to do. I mean, people had things to do to improve the society. Now we kind of sit back and say, we're spending a lot of money every month and somebody should wait on us. And I do feel like here at Timbercrest, we could make things a little more, it would be good for us to be involved in recycling and to do things. Okay.
My grandma used to put the newspapers into the recycling every day and then set the new ones out. It was a very important role for her in her life. All right, this group.
It seemed like one that got a lot of traction, which a number of you have already highlighted, is the solar panels. And Don particularly mentioned about the manor being up above the trees and being able to do that. And it seems that the presenters have some history too at their barn, and I'm not sure whether that input would have some effect, or as a possibility. If you share a little more, is that something that could be translated to the neighborhood homes here, particularly the ones that aren't under a whole lot of trees? It just seems like that is one of the practical ones that really we should put a lot of heads together for on different levels. And I know we've gotten a lot of that paper that comes with advertisements or on Facebook and stuff that gives examples of that there are companies and our groups that are working on that. So it seems like we should be able to focus, and since so many groups have highlighted that one, I think that is one of the key ones for actually moving ahead with something.
Yeah, and I mean, we heard what Jan said about the research Fern had done, but also like things change over time. And so maybe the answer would be different in terms of restrictions. Do you have something? Uh-huh. Right, there you go. So it might be time to ask again. Yeah, ask or demand.
On the thought of, as you were talking about putting the solar panels on the roof, I can tell you from experience, we did it on our house before we came here. And you go to replace that roof and you're talking buku bucks. I mean, it would be better, like you said, to have it out on the lawn. If we're going to do it, have it out on the lawn where it's open and you're not going to have to replace the roof, because that really gets into a whole different range. And you have to go through an electric company in order to do that. It's a process that will cost you money, but you'll save it in the long run because of the solar panels. But those are just some thoughts.
That's good enough.
Did you have any ideas you wanted to share? No. Okay.
Well, excellent. Way to go. Kudos to all of you on these. I mean, what you were grappling with were sometimes personal things, things that you can do personally as an individual, as a family. But then some of them are larger issues that takes a cluster of people to organize and get the energy to make things happen. And some of those issues may be ones that take more than just a Seniors for Peace. You need to bring in allies to work with you to make things happen. So those are the efforts that you've looked at. Like solar panels, I heard, electric vehicles, mowing, reduce the mowing here, don't do the mowing, more recycling of paper, check efficiency of where it's going, who's responsible. Can we take personal responsibilities that maybe we've said, well, somebody else can do it. Well, I could do it. Less water. That's a major issue around the globe. Drinking water is becoming a very scarce item almost everywhere around the world. So we sometimes talk about when it's yellow, let it mellow. When it's brown, flush it down on a toilet. You know, why do we use drinking water to flush our toilets? Take more personal initiative. So those are some of the things I was hearing. Do you want to comment, Heidi, on where you think the energy is, or?
Well, you know more than I do about that, but it sounds like there's a lot of energy about the solar panels and a lot of knowledge in the room, and and you're recognizing there's access to maybe other knowledge that you could easily get. Do you want to say
About Joyfield? Yeah. Remind me, I think you're on REMC here, is that right? Okay. Our experience with REMC is that we don't get paid very much for our electricity. We don't get an exchange. Like if we pump it in, we don't get back the same amount we pump in. We get 4 cents a kilowatt hour, which is bulk rate for ours, but we've decided that in spite of the fact that we aren't going to get a return on our investment for solar panels, I think this is our 12th year, I think just this week, our 12th year. So we don't get a return on ours, but like if you were on Duke, you would get, if you pumped in, you'd get it back. Or in some companies, you get paid so much a kilowatt hour, or it goes on your credit for your bill. So there are a variety of things that do, and I'm assuming Kosciuszko REMC, which I think you're hooked to, would have a similar thing to Wabash REMC that we're hooked to. But yes, Don. The bulk rate? Um, Yeah, I think REMC has their own, what they pay for bulk rate electricity. Instead of demand time, there are peak demand times. And if we got paid at what peak demand time is when we pump it in, we'd be sitting high, but we don't. But the meters are set up to do that we would pay for demand time electricity as well as we could get paid for demand time electricity, but it's not set up that way. So I assume there's a state agency that regulates REMC at. Yes.
Yeah, so
That would
that's
be the
back to
thing.
like the activism and changing laws, right? I mean, another thing could be to change how REMC works so that then places like Timbercrest would be more incentivized because they'd be getting paid for the power.
So some of you folks should run for the REMC boards. Fantastic. Good energy, good creativity, way to share together. I would encourage you to step out in some of those ways on several of these issues. I think you can do several at a time. You're a large group and you'll have different ways and energies that you're willing to invest in this. And I think you can make dramatic changes. And I would guess you could probably stop climate change in probably 1 year. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great.